Video game bosses are generally intimidating, posing a significant threat both physically and psychologically, and requiring a lot of preparation on the part of the player in order to make facing them at all possible. There are some foes that take this more to heart than others, though, and end up having massive hulking forms that not only take up the entire screen, but sometimes a whole in-game continent, or 5. It's these gigantic enemies that we're taking a look at for today's list. Though we couldn't find specific official numbers for many of them, they're still well above the size of most standard video game bosses, and absolutely dwarf the majority of their competitors. Since many of the biggest bads ever pop up towards the end of their respective games, there is of course a spoiler warning in effect for the duration of this list. Beware, the only thing worse than having a game spoiled for you is being trodden on by something massive at the same time. Well, unless you're into that, I don't know. Anyway, I'm Peter from TripleJump, and here are 10 of the biggest video game bosses. Number 10. Dalamadur, Monster Hunter 4. The Monster Hunter series is all about, well, hunting monsters, many of whom are giant and tough to face, meaning there is some debate as to just which one is technically the largest. Many would argue that the Laviente should take the top spot, but according to the Japanese wiki, it only reaches about 430 meters in length, which means that with all of the information available to us, the massive serpent-like foe known as Dalamadur is actually the biggest the series has to offer. Introduced in Monster Hunter 4, the Elder Dragon, known as Dalamadur, measures up to around 440 meters and doesn't even fully fit on the screen, meaning players will have to hack away at whatever bit of the scaly hide they can manage to both see and reach. It doesn't help that it's able to climb and contort around the rocky pillars of its home, thanks to its many spines, along with its sharp claws. As if all of its spiky bits weren't intimidating enough though, Dalamadur can also breathe fire, which is one too many things to be worrying about all at the same time, if you ask me. Once it's finally slain, it will drop some scale and bone, but getting there will take a lot of time and patience. Number 9. Ugh-zan 4, Serious Sam 3, BFE. The eponymous Sam of Serious Sam fame fights no small number of aliens on his adventures, many of whom are much bigger than your average beastie. By our measure though, none can quite compete with the final boss of Serious Sam 3, BFE. The horrible scuttling monster known as Ugh-zan 4 is one of many incarnations of the Ugh-zan dynasty, and serves as a general in main antagonist Mental's army. When he's encountered, he rises up out of the sand, toppling walls and pillars, and towering high above Sam on his legs that are somehow both mechanical and insect-like at the same time. Ugh. As though his size doesn't make him enough of a fearsome foe, he constantly spawns reinforcements and is also able to spin incredibly quickly atop his cybernetic base, meaning he can face whatever threat is coming his way head-on as the fight progresses. However, with a combination of jetpack boosts and incredibly powerful weapons, and with some help from the resident sand whale, this awful antagonist can finally be put down for good. It's too bad the lineage doesn't end with him, but taking out one is better than taking out none at all. Number 8. Kronos, God of War 3. If the God of War series is to be believed, anyone who wishes to take on a pantheon of gods has a massive challenge ahead of them, quite literally, so it's not a task that most of us should even think about. Thankfully though, Kratos isn't just anyone, and is a large man himself, being canonically 7.5 feet tall prior to 2018. But even he is absolutely dwarfed by the leader of the Titans, Kronos, who gazes down at him much like a curious child might observe a single ant before trying to crush it between their fingers. After causing the equivalent of a few paper cuts, Kratos lands on Kronos' arm and has to make his way up to a more advantageous position, all the while fighting off the Titan's horrible infestation of subcutaneous skeletons. Slowly but surely though, he is able to do some damage as he climbs, especially to one fingernail in particular. Oh, that makes me cringe. This isn't enough to end the fight though, as Kronos takes matters into one of his own massive hands and swallows Kratos whole. Now this might have been a great idea if he hadn't still had his weapons with him, as all it achieves is to allow him to destroy the foe from the inside out with the world's worst stomach pain. Now that's what I call a punch in the gut. Number 7. Jubileus Bayonetta. The first of 3 Platinum Games titles on our list, Bayonetta is certainly not one to shy away from spectacle, with its elaborate flashy combat and the titular witch's ridiculous hairdo-based magical powers. However, even the most impressive of these has nothing on Jubileus, the enormous angel who is the embodiment of divine will, capable of combining the Trinity of Realities. Also known by the longer title, Jubileus the Creator, this enemy is one of the major antagonists of the first game and serves as its final boss, beating the heck out of Bayo and Jean over the course of a grueling and intensive 5-stage battle. Even reaching her in order to start wailing on her in the first place is a feat, requiring a long journey on a motorbike and in panther form before the player is even in a position to start causing any actual damage. Eventually she can be bested, whereupon she's punched into the sun by Queen Sheba, who's been summoned by the witchy duo, but even so, it's fair to say that this particular difficult boss fight is often won only by a hair. Yeah, I know, it was pretty good, wasn't it? I enjoyed it. Number 6. Grune, Nier Automata. Nier Automata starts as it means to go on by featuring a massive boss fight in the opening, which is by no means the only one the game has to offer. Probably the biggest fight of the lot is the one against the giant multi-stage boss that players will have to endure once they stumble across Grune. Initially created to kill off the androids, Grune was dumped into the depths of the ocean after it couldn't differentiate between its own kind and those it was supposed to destroy, and left there so it wouldn't cause any more damage. According to the game's official strategy guide, Grune is at least 2 kilometers tall, bursting forth from the water and destroying the aircraft carrier that 2B and 9S have gone to assist, and towering well above the flooded city that surrounds it. The fight with this behemoth has several different stages, requiring the pair to attack its lasers, EMP cores, and mouth, as well as dodge the many small flyers it sends out before the foe finally collapses. If it makes you feel any better, Grune was just trying its best to be a good machine and cried out for its mother once it was abandoned. Oh, sorry, did I say better? I meant much, much worse. Number 5. Riftworm, Gears of War 2. This one may not be a boss in the traditional sense, it's more of a wild card entry, oh goodness me, given that this is less a one-on-one fight and more the player wreaking absolute havoc on a mostly helpless enemy, but the sheer size and scale of the Riftworm, plus the effort that it takes to best it, certainly makes it feel like a boss. The first appearance of this undulating menace is relatively subtle, simply showing up along the left wall of a cavern as the squad proceeds through a tunnel. Sometime later though, after the gears have made it back to the surface, the worm wakes up and rises out of the ground, devouring everything that happens to get in its way, including the helicopter all of them are on. Once inside their meaty prison, Marcus Phoenix and the rest of Delta Squad have to make their way methodically through the guts of their foe, avoiding all sorts of horrible fleshy-looking blockages as they try to reach each of the 3 hearts and take care of the attached arteries with their lancers. The squad all clearly took some notes from Kratos, breaking their way out of the Riftworm once they've taken it down, just to make sure they've added insult to injury. Number 4. Jerginga, the Wonderful 101. It's Platinum Games back one final time with another title that has a whole host of baddies that are massive, memorable, and at least partly mechanical. It's one in particular, though, that stands head, shoulders, and giant mech suit legs above the rest. Ugh-zan is another final boss in this list and has 3 different forms, presenting itself as a brain in a jar known as the Machine World, a brain in an amalgamation of machine parts called Wonder Ugh-zan, and the final, most massive version, the Space Fortress, which was holding the brain all along, known by the quite concerning name Ugh-zan Planet Destruction form. This huge mech is hard to measure exactly, but it's a significant size when compared to the Earth as it hurtles down to cause destruction and wipe out humanity. And the only way the eponymous 101 can deal with it is by literally joining together to form Ultra Platinum Robo and blasting away at Ugh-zan with everything they have, because even their original most powerful form, Platinum Robo, isn't enough to take it on, and they're flicked away like an insect when they first try to best the foe. They do manage it in the end, of course, but sadly, I can only assume that there was a planet-wide extinction regardless, thanks to all that rotation. Oh my god, that'd be enough to make anyone feel queasy. Number 3. Tau Volantis Moon, Dead Space 3. Dead Space 3 may be the least loved game in the series, but that doesn't mean there's nothing memorable about it. In particular, the final boss fight really sticks in the mind, a bit like how the necromorphs stick in Isaac, really. To be perfectly accurate, the Tau Volantis moon is no moon at all in the traditional sense, but is instead what's known as a Brethren moon, a sentient mass which is the result of a convergence event where all the organisms in the area coagulated and formed one entity considered the final stage of necromorph evolution. Sounds pleasant. This particular glob of fleshy monster bits is only half formed, having been interrupted by a machine which froze the planet it was using for its convergence. Unfortunately though, a higher-ranking member of the Church of Unitology, Jacob Danik, finds this out, shutting down the only thing keeping the moon at bay and forcing Isaac and secondary protagonist John Carver to fight the monster. Formerly dormant, the now activated moon starts consuming whatever it can, whipping its tentacles around the place and providing ample nightmare fuel until it finally slams down onto the surface of a planet and is gone for good. I mean, it did awaken all the other Brethren moons as well, but let's just focus on the positives for now, shall we? Number 2. Unicron, Transformers. It may be surprising that there could be any foes that are bigger than the rough approximation of a moon, but allow me to introduce you to Unicron, the final big bad of the PS2 Transformers game, or Transformers Armada Prelude to Energon if you want to get a more specific title about this. This enormous metal miscreant is one of the earliest known creations in the Transformers universe, and is estimated to be around 50,000 kilometers wide, meaning he's larger than the majority of planets in our solar system. Towards the end of this particular adventure, the Autobots discover and take out Megatron's base, located on a remote volcanic island somewhere in the Pacific, and have to fight their way through to the center in order to confront him and take him out for good. They later depart, believing themselves fully victorious, but unbeknownst to them, much bigger problem Unicron has arrived in the meantime. He begins destroying Cybertron, so it's up to Optimus Prime, Red Alert, Hotshot, and their army of minicons to fly directly into the foe and blast his core from the inside. So, now we've seen something the size of a planet, where do we go from here? Well, the only way is up, by which I mean, number 1, Chakravartin, Asura's Wrath. Over the course of cult classic action-adventure Asura's Wrath, players will come face to face with a huge number of massive foes that the titular demigod will have to contend with. Though most would consider Gongan Wyzen to be the largest the gaming world has to offer, he actually doesn't even come close, and in fact, can't even claim to be the biggest enemy in his own game, as Asura's Wrath's DLC, which includes the true ending, introduces one that's even larger, Chakravartin. When compared to Asura whilst in his creator form, Chakravartin doesn't seem all that impressive, and might appear to be a bit of a pushover for something that's meant to be a final boss. However, the form known as Golden Chakravartin is a whole different story. Over the course of this phase of their battle, Chakravartin appears as a huge golden statue flying through space while being seated firmly atop a galaxy that's in the center of the universe, with other galaxies dotted all around him. If that wasn't indication enough of exactly how cosmically big he is, the massive golden boy flings stars and planets at Asura with no problems at all. Never before has the phrase "the universe is out to get you" felt quite so literal.